Hello, my name is Antonios Hadjigeorgialis. I'm a principal solution engineer here at Prime Trust. Prime Trust is a regulated trust company that acts as a custodian to fintech companies in the crypto industry. We offer a fully API-driven approach to creating back-end infrastructure that connects crypto to the mainstream US dollar financial system. This allows you to create compliant infrastructure to move money in and out of your customers' custodial accounts and convert between US dollars and digital assets. Probably the best way to really describe Prime Trust is for me to show you a high-level diagram of what exactly the API offers. So in this diagram here, you see two boxes on the left here. You have the external world on the top and Prime Trust on the bottom. So generally, as a Prime Trust customer, you get an API user that you create that gives you access to our API. The first start in the process would be using our KYC API to create accounts for your customers. So there's a handful of API endpoints. The /v2 accounts is the main one that passes all of the contact information, and it allows us to process all of the compliance automation in the background to verify that your customer is who they say they are, and that we know who they are before this account gets open. And then your end user becomes a contact within our API. We have several internal APIs to move assets between accounts. So we have what we typically refer to as the settlement API, which is a single API call that allows you to settle a trade between two accounts. So you can move dollars in one direction or assets in the other. You can actually move, assets in both directions, depending on what kind of trade it is that you're trying to settle. There's a cash transfer API that has some limited use cases for moving cash between accounts, and there's also an asset transfer API. This is all internal to Prime Trust accounts. We also have our liquidity API. This is a /v2 quotes, where you can actually convert between dollars and various assets. I'm showing some of the top ones here, but there's about 8 to 10 assets that we support right now, and it's basically customer driven. So as our customers need access to converting to different assets, we will be able to spin that up in the future. Now, another big piece of it is getting money in and out, or even assets in and out. So here you see you can move assets in and out of Prime Trust to an external wallet on the blockchain. And on this side, you're showing various ways to get money in or out of an account. You can set up direct deposit instructions, so you could have your payroll provider directly deposit into a Prime Trust custodial account. Or from your external bank account, you can move money via a debit card, ACH pull, wire transfer. We also offer Signet. And then for disbursements, you have ACH and wires, going out. So that's kind of a high-level overview of everything that we offer. Now, what I want to show you today is going to be more detail around our liquidity API. So I'm going to show you a demo app that we created. This app here is showing kind of a simple buy and sell screen, basically an order ticket to be able to purchase crypto from an existing Prime Trust custodial account. There's a ticker here that shows some of the assets that we support, and you can include a dollar amount. So what we provide is what's called a request for quote system. So when you get a quote, you see it will pop up. It will have a price attached to it, not a live price. This is just our sandbox that we're looking at. It'll tell you what quantity of assets you can get for that dollar amount that you submitted. And it gives you a time where this quote is going to expire and no longer be executable. So you can see I talked for more than 10 seconds and this button is now disabled. If I get a quote now, I can execute it. And then you see a fill pop up here. So now I'm going to switch over to Postman and show you the actual API calls that are behind this app working. So our /v2 quotes endpoint controls all of the conversions between dollars and assets. We do have a /v2 assets endpoint that gives you a list of these asset IDs that are required. So once you have the asset ID that you want to purchase and a specific account ID as well, you can submit a transaction. This one is for a buy. You can also do a sell. You can choose a dollar amount like I showed in the demo. And this variable hot false is the default value. So we have what's considered hot or warm balances inside of each custodial account. The main difference between the two is that with a warm balance, which is the default value, those balances require human intervention whenever there's a disbursement from a Prime Trust custodial account. So regardless of whether it's hot or warm, you'll get the owner of the account will always get an email confirmation that they have to approve before there's any assets dispersed. That's one of the security features on the custodial accounts. But in the case of the hot transfer versus a warm, with warm, our operations team will also review the transaction just to look for anything suspicious before that goes out, whereas hot is fully automated and the transaction will go out immediately after the owner verifies that they do indeed want to disperse those assets. So getting back to this quote functionality, if I send this API call, this is going to give a response which includes an ID, and that ID will allow us to execute this quote. So if I click over here to execute the quote, you see now for the base amount that we submitted, you see a price, the unit count, and the status shows up as executed pending settlement. So we have two different versions of settlement. What I just showed you is set up by default in my organization that I'm operating in as instant settlement. So even though this says executed pending settlement, this trade was actually immediately settled, milliseconds in an asynchronous process after I received this response. If I were to retrieve the quote status now, we'll see here that it's already settled. And again, it has a trade ID attached, which is just another object that has more details about this transaction that you could pull up should you need it. You have when this was created, when it was executed, and when it was settled is all available as data items. If you do want to do a hot transaction, you can do a hot transaction, which will put that balance of the asset into your hot balance for immediate dispersal. We normally see this more in use cases where people are using or the liquidity to purchase stable coins that are then going to be used in some other process within their ecosystem. The process is exactly the same. It's just as one field is the only difference between the two transactions. We also have an option, instead of using a dollar amount, you can request a specific quantity of the asset to however many decimal places that asset supports. In this case, I have the asset set to Bitcoin, so we have up to 8 decimal places. And the response looks pretty much the same. You have all the same details here. The status is pending. This is on the quote because it hasn't been executed yet. And then this will just be expired after 10 seconds. So the other settlement method that I mentioned, we have instant settlement, and then we have what we call scheduled settlement. So scheduled settlement, it could be looked at as what might be referred to as post-trade settlement in mainstream financial markets. It's a common thing. If you're familiar with stock trades, you buy a stock today, you actually don't pay for it for about 2 days, I believe it is. Now it's T+2. In this case, if you prefer scheduled settlement, you can have that configured in your organization. In the organization that I'm showing this demo in, I actually have this set as not my default. I have instant settlement set as default, so that's why I'm having to specify this trade desk ID. In production, that's not always necessary, but what is necessary is this field here, delayed settlement. So the main difference is with the instant settlement, if the funds to execute the trade are not in the custodial account before you try to execute that quote will fail.
No, het zit gewoon met 24 mensen in een...
Okay, where with scheduled settlement, you can move the funds in after the trade is executed. So you could be moving a wire to the account sometime during the day. You could execute a quote while you're waiting for the wire to settle. And then by the end of the day, you have the funds available to move into that custodial account and settle that trade. And let's see here, when you execute it, yeah, so that's basically the flow. It's really just a single API endpoint and 2 API calls to convert between dollars and crypto, and you can also go from crypto to dollars. So if you're selling, obviously, yeah, both transactions are available. And that is, I think, everything that I have.